Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for a conversation on making Black history with myself and our Senate leader, Senator Greg Taylor, who I cannot be more than honored to be talking with tonight. For many of us, Senator Greg Taylor has been in the Senate representing Senate District 33 since 2008. In November of this past year, he was elected as our minority floor leader in the Indiana Senate. And he currently serves as a senior counsel at MWH Law Group, specializing in municipal finance law. And without further ado, I want to bring on Senator Greg Taylor.
All right. Am I up now? Huh?
Yeah.
All right. So, first of all, thank you for having me. I guess I did make Black history, not only being a part of the Indiana General Assembly since 2008, but also from what I found out after I was elected, being the first leader of a caucus that was minority in the state of Indiana history. Some of you might know this already, but I believe in 2018, we celebrated the 200-year existence or bicentennial for the state of Indiana. So, from my opinion, I thought it was something that had been done before, but found out that I was the first Black elected official to lead an Indiana caucus. So I'm honored to be a part of this historic accomplishment. I'm humbled that the members of my caucus saw it to be fit for me to be elected to the position. And I can say very, very confidently that it's been an interesting session already. As a Democrat, so your viewers know, we are in the super minority. We have 11 Democrats and 39 Republicans. I continue to fight for what I believe is the rights and the privileges that we are all given under the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of Indiana, to make life better for all Hoosiers. It's a difficult task, but it's something I think I'm up to, and I'm honored to be a part of the discussion tonight. So thank you for having me. Long-winded, but there you go.
Thank you. And actually, we actually go back to 2016 when we first met. I was an intern for Senator Rogers from Gary, Indiana, and one of my favorite moments involves you getting me in trouble with her because it was close to the end of session that year, and of course, session runs a little bit later in the night. And you asked me to go run up to grab a pop. And as I came back down to the floor and handed to you the pop, Senator Rogers had turned around and caught me and came over to scoring us. So thanks to you, I got in trouble with Senator Rogers.
I got in trouble with her a lot too. My mom, God rest her soul, met Senator Rogers during the 2010 session, I think it was, and she met her and they had a long conversation. And after that conversation, my mom said to me in front of Senator Rogers, "You listen and do whatever she tells you to do," and that continues to this day. So I call her Mama Rogers. So James, you work for a very, very influential lady who's done a lot for not only Gary, the area that she represented, but also the state of Indiana. So we are all honored and should be honored to have been able to work with her.
Yes, and I am so thankful for that time, looking up to giants like you and her, and seeing y'all lead the charge in the Senate. And looking back on your career, since before even 2008, when you were first elected to the Senate, how has race shaped your pathway to getting where you are now?
Um, so let me just start with my history that a lot of people may not know. I wasn't born in Indiana. I was born in Lake Providence, Louisiana. Um, Lake Providence happens to be known for being the poorest city in America for about 12 years. Um, I actually was born, my mother was the youngest of 16 children, and my grandfather was a sharecropper in Louisiana. So when I was born, uh, my mom moved to Marion, Indiana, and then I moved to Marion when I was like 3 or 4, and that's where I went to school and was raised. So after I after I graduated from Marion High School, I went to IU, and then I went to got an undergraduate degree in economics, and then I went to law school uh, and graduated from there. And in 1997, I moved to Indianapolis and started working for state government. So my first entree into politics was through my job as a project manager for the state of Indiana, where I was in charge of bringing new companies and creating jobs. It's what it's called now is the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, IEDC. When I was there, it was called the Indiana Department of Commerce. So I met uh, Senator Glenn Howard, who was my predecessor in this position. So I worked with him uh, in local politics. I worked on a couple campaigns for prosecutor, helped him pass out literature for his district. And then I moved into his district in about 2004, I believe it was. No, it would have been 2002 because my daughter, no, 2004 because my daughter was born. Um, so when he decided to retire, I talked to his family. I talked to several of my friends, and they said, "Hey, Greg, you'd be the best person to take his place. You can't fill his shoes, so don't even think about that. But you can do this." And I was very, very humbled to be elected in 2008 to that position. So that's my history. You know, a lot of things, a lot of lessons learned about being African American in the state of Indiana. Uh, Went through a lot of struggles in Marion. Marion's known for the last lynching. Uh, uh, I, you know, was not there. My aunt actually knew one of the men who were hung from the tree in Marion. So it was an interesting historical perspective to have, especially coming from Louisiana, where in the 1970s Jim Crow was very strong.
And
So,
I do remember you telling me that you were from Louisiana. I never asked why. Even looking at my grandmother, who was born in Texas and moved up to Gary in the early 1950s, like what drew African Americans up to Indiana of all places, especially with its history of our state government at one time was controlled by the KKK in almost every aspect. So, what was it special about Indiana?
so my uncles, like I said, my mom was the youngest. My uncles started working in a factory. Dana Corporations, General Motors. There was Ball Foster. My mother moved to Marion because there was some jobs in a factory called RCA, which was later Thompson, and then was purchased by General Electric. So my mother uh, came up here for a job because my uncles had been to Marion and had been working there for a couple of years. So it was all about having the opportunity to work for a living and raise a family. So my mom moved me and my sister. My sister was born a couple years after me, and she moved us up to Marion, and that started. But the impetus about moving there was not uh, about being the best place to live. It was about having the access to jobs. In Louisiana, you couldn't do anything as someone of color unless it was working in the field digging for potatoes or, you know, working in a sawmill. So that's where it was economics.
And then from your like childhood and then going off to college at IU and then working for the state government, along the way, how did these experiences motivate you to uh, say, one, yes, I want to be a senator, and then second, now to step up and say, yes, I'm ready to be the Senate minority leader?
James, it's that's a great question. And when I talk about what motivated me, I remember the simple things that I had to do. Like I remember an experience in third grade, and some people have probably heard me tell this story, but it's a great story. When I was in third grade, we had a competition for math, right? It was you had to go up to a chalkboard. For those listeners who are born after in my time period, it was a chalkboard. You guys have whiteboards now, but you had to go up and we had a competition with our class, right? So in my school, we were poor, so there were poor white people and poor black people, but it was probably 50-50, and I won the competition. But the kid who came in second, his name was Kevin Carmichael, and Kevin was white. And after school, the Miss Katie said, "Hey, Greg, come here." She said, "Congratulations on winning. The next stage is to go to Indianapolis, and if you win Indianapolis, you go to the national." And I said, "Wow, I'm excited. I'm gonna go tell my mom." She said, "Hold on a second. I think it would be better if Kevin actually represented this school, because you're more than likely to go work a factory, and you really don't need this. And Kevin is probably going to go on and go to college. His parents want him to go to school and do better things. So I'm going to let Kevin represent the school for the third grade." And, I was taught you always respect your teacher. So I didn't question it. I didn't do anything. I lived 2 blocks away from the school. So on the way home, I started crying. I was like, why? I won. So I get home and I tell my mom, I'm like, "Look, Mom, I won, and Kevin is going to get to go to Indianapolis." And she said, "Did you win?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Did everybody see that you won?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, why you need to go to Indianapolis? Go in there and, clean up your room, I got something for you." And she baked a cake for me, invited all my cousins over, and we celebrated me winning the math contest. And she never went and talked to Miss Katie and say, "Hey, it ain't fair that you don't say." She said, "You don't need her to actually validate what you've done. You don't need to go to Indianapolis. And you're going to learn in life that people are going to be doing that to you all the time. You're not supposed to be in this position. But if you keep letting other people dictate to you what you can do, then you'll never be successful." And I never forgot that. I was treated bad. I was one of 2 black kids in college prep classes in high school. When I went to college, I had no idea what the experience was like. All I knew is that if I studied, I could do what I need to do. I went to law school basically because a law professor taught me my junior year, taught a class, and he said, "Come over to the class and I want you to see what they do." So I'll go over to the class, law school class. It was 50 minutes. They talked about cases. I was like, I can do this. Hell, I didn't even know that you took a bar exam until I was after my second year. And they were like, "Well, you can't practice unless you take the bar exam." I'm like, what is a bar exam? I graduate from law school. I have no money. God blessed me by knowing Bill Cook and having met and been mentored by Bill Armstrong, who was a known figure in Bloomington. And Bill Cook gave me a loan that ended up being forgiven so I could study for the bar exam because most people got a loan to study for the bar exam for 3 months before you took it. I would just go and work. He's like, nah, you can't do that. So I took the bar exam, and there we go. Now, I didn't go straight into a law firm. I never knew what a clerkship was, right? So, you work in the summer, and then they make you an offer. I ended up working for the Department of Commerce. I think I was making, at that time, it was like $32,000 a year. My buddies who I went to law school with, whose dads and moms or cousins were lawyers, they were making $65,000, $70,000 a year. I was like, wow, And then met some people through my economic development experience and went to a law firm. And when I took the offer to my uncle, he said, boy, your uncle would have to work, 70, 80 hours a week to make this kind of money. You've been blessed. That was my, I don't know, people say that down in Louisiana, they always talk about your family paying it forward. I think there was a lot of blessings that were given to my family, which is huge. Remember, I told you I had 15 aunts and uncles. I think I have, at one point, when we stopped counting, I had somewhere around 74 first cousins and 85. I mean, it just, our family's huge, but we've got me as a lawyer, state senator. Two of my cousins went to technical school. What was it called? The like top technical school in the country. One of them is the number 3 person.
Is it MIT or
MIT? Yeah. She's the number 3 person at Disney. We have 2 doctors. I mean, this is all from a family where the first half of the family actually picked cotton in the cotton fields. So I've never shied away from struggle. As a matter of fact, I've embraced it. I've always found a way to take a bad situation and flip it into a good one. And I think once you do that, you can do about anything you want to do. It's going to take a little longer than our counterparts, but hey, that's what we're here for.
And that your story shares some aspects of my family story too. From my great grandparents were sharecroppers in Texas, Mississippi, and when they got the opportunity to get a job up north in the factories, my great granddad, he was the first one to go get settled in. There were some other family members who had a 3-story building, and every family took a floor and shared it.
Yeah, that's what we did too. My aunt bought a duplex, and my mom and me and my sister lived in one room, and my cousins. It was amazing, man.
Yeah, and my grandmother would tell me all the time, her, and she was the only child. Her and her parents, they lived on one floor, and then eventually saved up enough, got a house, and then we actually went to go visit her around Christmas time, and got to show off my new car with her, and we just drove around Gary, and she told me about where the family first lived at and which church they went to, and just to see how family goes from sharecroppers to my grandmother. She did what she could. I remember her telling me about waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive out to Illinois to help pay the bills. My granddad working at Ford in Chicago Heights, and all of that. Kids are now able to get some jobs that aren't so menial, and then now their grandkids can go off to college. And it's just, for me, getting my college degree was, I felt a moment where it wasn't about me. It was a work of generations going into that, and building up to that moment where I think I am the first in my immediate family to go off to college, and you just feel the weight of generations before you paving that road for you.
Well, my uncle used to always tell me, hey, your mama gave you that name, but your grandfather started that name. Yeah. So every time, anything you do is is basically you can either make their name better or you can make their name worse. And that was, I'll be honest with you, that was one of the things that I used to think about when I was in law school and I wanted to quit.
Mhm.
Sitting there hungry, and you had to read another 7 cases and outline those cases. That it was a lot of struggle, but you find yourself in a position now where I'm in the Senate, where it's a struggle every day. And yes, I some people say, well, Greg, you need to calm down sometimes. It's kind of interesting as a Black male for people to tell you to calm down when you see so much frustration and vitriol from your white colleagues, but they can do it in a calm voice. Does it really matter how you say what you say, or is it what you say? And so when I find myself, sometimes I have to, and I still do it today. What would my mom say about what I was doing about her name? My uncles, who, a couple have gone on to glory, but a couple of them are here. I find myself writing them letters and just saying thank you. Sending them letters. They all have a stack of letters from me. Some of my law firm. When I went to the law firm, I wrote them all letters, and then when I got elected first to the Senate, I wrote them. And I go to their house, man, and they got these letters up in frames and stuff. It's kind of cool. But now that I'm leader, I'm probably gonna have to do another letter. So it's really humbling, but it shows that perseverance and hard work, real hard work, not just doing what you're supposed to do, but sometimes doing what you have to do, is just it's fulfilling, man. So I love it.
So around 2008, when you first got to the Senate, and even right before then, what have been like some of the barriers that you and other folks of color have faced when it's come to getting into office and then being in office?
It's kind of interesting. So we had this running joke at the Indiana Department of Commerce when I worked there. So I had to travel to different areas. I tell people in less than 3 years, I traveled to 75 of the 92 counties. So I would go. Now, I was always bearing good news, right? So when I was going, I was meeting a potential company to come and create jobs. But what I would always end up doing, I'd show up about a half an hour early, and we'd meet at like a little restaurant in town. I'd walk in and I'd sit there and I'd get a glass of water or a Coke. And it was always interesting to me when the local officials would show up and be like, we're looking for somebody named Greg Taylor from the Indiana Department of Commerce. And a couple of times I was like one of 4 people in the place, but it couldn't have been me that was there representing the state of Indiana. It was just impossible. So I would sit there sometimes and I'd play along with it and let them sit there. They'd be like, well, where's this guy at? And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. I've been here for 20 minutes where, I didn't know you got, and the look on their eyes, they would be like, oh my God, that's Greg Taylor. And so then it started dawning on me that it really wasn't that they didn't really respect or didn't know that a Black man could be. It was like, wow, this is weird. I've never had the experience sitting down with a guy. So then they go overboard and they start doing stuff like, hey, this would be a great place for you to come and raise a family. Now, little did they know that my family consisted of me and my Caucasian wife. So I would sit there and have these conversations, and then I'd show them a picture of our kid or something. And they'd be like, oh, okay. That didn't sit well in some areas. But so when I got into politics, I'll never forget. Here's a good story about before I got elected. So the district that I represent is very diverse, and I love my constituents. I mean, I got everything from $1 million houses to people who just are struggling just to get by. But what it provides me with is such a different environment. I've had to be able to go into poor communities and wealthy communities and accomplish the same thing. So it just has helped me develop. But when I was running for office, I remember the guy who was doing my pamphlets, right? He says to me, "Hey, I need to get a picture of you and your family to put on the card. You know, people want to get to know you." And I'll be like, "Oh man, you know what? I'll get that to you." So we continued down the path, and he'd be like, hey, Greg, now we got to get this family picture again." I was like, "Okay, I got you, man. I got you." About 2 weeks before the election, he says, "Look, I'm not going to be able to put this together if you don't get me a picture of a family." I said, "Look, man, why don't we do this? Why don't we go to a school? I'm going to sit down with some kids. You take some pictures. You know, we did." Because I didn't know how people were going to take the fact that if you look at me and my wife, you're going to be like, "Hey, whoa, hey." And really, it really doesn't mean a lot. You know what I mean? And those are the kind of decisions, the life decisions back in 2008 are so different than now. You know, everybody knows. Everybody, you know, some of the legislators are shocked sometimes when they say, "Who you married to?" But it's kind of interesting because when you think about it from the whole world perspective, isn't that what this country was built on? It's about people from different backgrounds coming together, learning from each other, and producing this kind of diverse community that everybody can strive together. Now, not everybody has the same opportunities. I don't want to, you know, disillusion anybody. But it's still part of bettering the entire community. And everybody can play a part. So, you know, for me, before 2008, it was always, you know, I always found myself trying to figure out, you know, that kind of stuff.
And you know, it hasn't dawned on me until now that in 2008, that was the same time our country elected the first African American president. So for you, your family being a interracial family, and then being a leader in elected office around the same time as our country is electing its first African American first family to as well to the White House. How did things change, or did any dynamics as far as when people saw you and your family?
Oh, yeah. So you talking about so it's kind of interesting. My district is gerrymandered. So
Yeah.
let's just put it out there. The Democrat district, it's a Democrat district, like 78% Democrat. So I was the first person on the stage that night, right? This was before they had even called the election for President Obama. So I walk up on the stage with my baby, my third child in my arm, and my other two kids, and then my wife. And the lady comes up and she's like, "Ma'am, we want Mr. Taylor." So my wife is like, that's my husband. And so we walk up, and you know, it didn't even dawn on me because I wanted to get back to my room because I wanted to make sure that President Obama was elected. And my mother was there. And I'm going to tell you something. The look on her face when they called Pennsylvania, which is when they knew that he was going to be president, she was like, she put her hand on her heart and she was like, "Baby, this guy." And I was like, "Mom, yeah." She's like, "You don't even know. My family knew some people." Lake Providence is actually outside of Vicksburg, Mississippi. So my family knew a lot of people, Medgar Evers, all those people who supported and they never thought in their lifetime they would ever see that. But it was a tremendous accomplishment for this country. And it continues to me to fuel some of the division that we have, but also it kind of fueled that whole discussion about being a minority in this country. His struggle, even as an elected president, still to me has given this country a foundation in which to improve. If he would have never been there, and people get mad at me when I say this sometimes, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Even Donald Trump being president has provided a benefit. And this comes from my history of being able to take a negative and flip it into a positive. He actually unveiled the racism and the feelings that we have in this country. And that is a good thing. Now, the fact that it exists is bad. But to unveil that is a tremendous thing. And it gives us the goal, as we see already starting with President Biden, to make sure that we do better. So I've always tried to flip those negatives to the. Now, it was a hard 4 years. Don't get me wrong. It was very hard.
Has anything like from those 4 years like changed, or how your colleagues, particularly on the right now, approach issues around race in our country and in the state?
This is what I will tell you. So coming from the country, I'm kind of a country boy. Everybody wants me to be a city boy. This is you live in Indianapolis, but I'm
my cousins are like country, and then they get on me about being city. So I get it.
Right. So I've spent time bird hunting in Pike County. Right now, this is funny. This is another good story. Mark Messmer, who's a Republican, he says to me, "Hey, you want to go bird hunting?" Now, be honest with you, I had shot a rifle, but I'd never been bird hunting. So I go bird hunting with him in Pike County. Now I drive into the field is a cornfield, and you got to go back into the cornfield to get to the hunting preserve, and it's called a put and take, where they put these birds out, and you have a hunting dog that goes out, sniffs out the birds, and then you kind of rattle the stalks and everything, and the bird flies up and you shoot, right? So I drive up in my Lexus 430 on this dirt road, mud, everything else. And the guy's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm here to meet Senator Messmer to go bird hunt. And coincidentally, right, he drives up right at the same time. And it was fun. I mean, I really never thought. Now, my mom was like, "Hey, boy, you going down to Southern Indiana with a shotgun and all this stuff? You be careful." But man, I really like it. I mean, we've been like 2 or 3 times since then. I even got my own shotgun. But I'm a country boy, and so I kind of get along. Their mindsets on the other side of the aisle are the same mindsets that I was raised on in Louisiana. Now, let's understand there's a difference. You can be conservative in your thoughts and policies, but be liberal in your implementation. So I find myself sometimes relating to what they say, but boy, we have different ways of getting to that same objective. So like this year, I can tell you this right now, James, and I want to commend President Pro Tem Rod Bray, who we've spent individual time together. We've had 12, I think as of today, it was 11 Democrat bills being heard in the state Senate already. And I think, we're in our 3rd week. And I think that comes from having a good relationship and actually being able to say, hey, man, we got some things in common. You might not think we do, but guess what? These are some things you might want to think about. And I challenged my caucus members to go to the chairs of the committees, and it's been a great, there's still some bad stuff. We passed a bill today. It was just terrible. But yeah, we've been doing a pretty good job. So, I think it's been a benefit that, President Obama was elected, Donald Trump was elected, and really unveiled a whole bunch of ugliness that we never wanted to see. And I think people are now seeing that when you have cooperation, not all the time, you're going to have your fights, but at the end of the day, we all have the same objective. So I think that's going to resonate going forward.
So now, taking all your years of experience in the Senate, um, working in state government, your background growing up in Louisiana, moving to Indiana, and just everything you have learned and everything that has happened in history over your lifetime. Now that you are the Senate Minority Leader, and in this position, leading one party in the Indiana Senate, what role do you see yourself now playing to affect positive change for the Black community?
So here's it's already playing itself out. Okay. And let me tell you how it works. I didn't know this going in. It was really the reason why I wanted to run for leadership was because I think we just needed a different voice, if that makes sense what I'm saying. Not that the voice that was there before was bad, but we just needed a different voice. And here's how it works. So now I'm on leadership calls, right? So when the governor calls and they talk about the rollout of the vaccine, for example, we're on the call. It's myself, it's Leader Giaquinta, President Pro Tem Bray, and Speaker Houston. So we're talking about the rollout of the vaccine. And we get to the discretionary part about where do we start? How do you start rolling out this vaccine? And without any prompting or anything else, the discussion of the effects of vaccines on the minority community gets spoken, gets brought up. Not by me, but by the medical professional call, right? So Dr. Weaver brings up this issue. And it moves into the discussion about how we address the disparities in the minority community. Now, listen, I don't consider myself to be the brightest person in the room, but the fact that my face was on that Zoom call, I think helped move the discussion. Maybe it would have been uncomfortable for somebody to bring that up if my face wasn't on there. Maybe they would have brought it up, but I can tell you this, by the time we finished, there was a new perspective that they were given from somebody who actually lives in that community about what we could do to help every Hoosier in the state of Indiana. And that's happening more and more. The governor's diversity appointment. That is not by happenstance. Okay? Having somebody name one other governor, Democrat or Republican, who's had in their cabinet a diversity position. That didn't happen through just me being there. That was part of President Obama. That was part of President Trump unveiling the bigotry and the racism that might be out there. That was all in the plan. And now it's made people realize that we need to address some of these issues in the state. So I don't want to take full credit for all the things that are happening, but I guarantee you, with my face being at the table, they know they can't get away without talking about it when I'm on the call. So that's just one example of how things have moved.
And going forth, how do you see, or what do you think would be the best ways for Black elected officials to keep taking back that narrative and making sure that we keep progressing in a way where it's automatic that how things affect the minority communities, and particularly the Black community, is brought up and given special attention, or attention is paid to it, because we all know there's that inequity and inequality and unbalance with everything due to the long racial history.
So here's when you think about where we are today and where we want to get, I am very confident that everybody wants everybody, even if they're black, white, purple, green, yellow, to be better off, right? So you start with those basic premises and you don't question the motive of other people. That's the start. Now, if their actions dictate something different, then you can start looking into why they feel the way they do. But what I have found is through a lot of conversation and getting to know people, there is the Black community is not monolithic in our thought. We've never been that way. Okay. So we have people who might relate to some of the issues that are going on in rural Indiana, but have the same issue here in the urban core. And what we've been able to do, and I'll give you a perfect example, this broadband expansion that we're talking about in rural Indiana, right? So we're talking about putting broadband availability in Indiana out in the rural Indiana. But here's the issue that I brought up in the urban core. We may have had the broadband expanded, but a lot of people don't know this. How do you get that from the actual broadband at your street to the house? That's an urban core issue. We're talking about broadband expansion. We're talking about not just getting. So when I talk to my colleagues about their broadband expansion, I said, you might want to think about how you get the connectivity from the home to the broadband, because that's the problem we're having right now. And he was like, wow, you're right. I didn't even think about that. So we added, now we're talking about connectivity. At the same time, we're talking about expansion. That's an urban issue, same issue in the urban core that it is in rural Indiana. So we're finding ways to communicate and finding ways to help each other. Because we're not, we got a lot of minorities in the urban area who need broadband expansion too, but they also need connectivity.
And you bring up a great point that for me, I look at it as it's not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. It's just a basic necessity that transcends the political lines. And then it's helping more Hoosiers along the way.
Helping people get degrees. It's helping families survive in a pandemic when their kids can't go to school. You think about the number of kids that are going to have to be better at communicating through social media and through all these other things. We've all never, listen, I always tell my kids, we used to pick up the phone and didn't know who was on the other end. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you just pick, if the phone rang, we used to fight to see who would get to the phone. Now you just look at your phone and be like, I don't want to talk to them. You couldn't do that when I was growing up. So it's a totally different thing, and we all have those issues. And as I tell my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, do not fall into the trap to thinking that the minority community thinks the same on everything. And I think it's really resonated with those guys, and they've really started to comprehend that.
And, I have to say, I caught the tail end of having those phones where we couldn't tell who was calling. Just the last few years.
Yeah, but you had the ones that didn't have the cord on it, right?
No, we had the cord. It was like
come
plugged
on, man.
Yeah. The house.
Hey, I still got 2 of them phones here, so don't be tripping. I'm gonna bring one out on you, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about.
Okay, it was like the cord plugged into the house wall and everything.
And you had to go get the long cord from Kmart because you had to be able to reach all the way over to the couch.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
And before we conclude, looking back on even just this last year and looking at the summer protests, and seeing now the conversation has gone beyond just in the Black community and just us tweeting every time a tragedy happens on social media, to now folks outside of the community are starting to get it. What do you say to Black Hoosiers who are now looking to move those conversations forward into action and looking to get involved in politics, or looking to even continue to be an advocate outside of government?
I think the lesson that we could learn from what happened this summer is that everybody has a different opinion based on the experiences that they have in life. Okay. And I'm not here to question somebody's integrity as to how they feel about stuff. You know, there are legislators from outside Indianapolis who believe Indianapolis is a terrible place to live. We're the murder capital of the state. We're all this bad stuff. And I always tell them, I want you to be careful at making that kind of assumption. Because what we do here in Indianapolis is actually the same as what happens in your community. And here's what I told, and this came, one of my colleagues, I won't mention his name. I said, you say the name Martinsville in certain communities in Indiana, and what do you get? Oh, they are racist, blah, blah, blah. It was lit. That probably upsets him. And I said, that probably would upset you. But my experience, and this is just my experience, me and my friend were driving back from Bloomington one day, and his car breaks down in Martinsville. This is a true story. On a Sunday, the guy who owned the garage that we pushed the car to left his home, came and fixed his car, and we drove the rest of the way to Marion. This is a true story. This is in Martinsville, Indiana. Now, my experience in Martinsville may be different than my friends who have been through there and maybe seen some stuff that I didn't see. But I've been to Martinsville since then. I've actually I know some people of color that live there. So I don't mind people having their own interpretation or their own opinions. But when you close your mind, and this is what I tell people is why this country has been so separated. When you say, hey, what I believe is true, and I'm not going to listen to anybody else, I'm not going to let anybody else help me, then that's where we struggle. And from my perspective and other people's perspective, Indianapolis is a great place to live, and it's a great place to raise a family. You got diversity, you got all these social economic ideas and concepts. If I want my kids to be in a school where people are poor and rich, or I want them to be in a totally rich school we have that asset here. Try to get that in rural Indiana. Okay, try to get that. You ain't gonna get it. So we have a lot of benefits here in Indianapolis, and what I've tried to do, and we've seen a lot of legislation associated with what happened over the summer, even here in Indianapolis. And I've tried to tell people, you be very careful, because when you start having these concepts and ideas and changing these laws, thinking that you're helping, you may actually be hurting the community that you believe, because all the stuff you believe is really not there. People protested. Yes, we had riots downtown, and they were bad. That there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But you don't need to change a law to stop it. You need to listen, and you need to hear what they're saying. And I'll leave you with this on that issue. The most appalling thing to me about people who actually have a disdain for these people acting out and doing what they've done, have no idea of the history of this country. Because our community didn't start the violence. We didn't invent the violence. As a matter of fact, we were anti-violent. And then we learned from our oppressors how to be violent. There's nothing that we could, if we just decided that we were going to do better for all of us, instead of focusing on what's bad. Listen, the Trail of Tears, the Tuskegee experiment, the lynchings, we could bring up all that bad stuff. But why? We bring it up so we don't forget it happened, but let's move on. And that's what I've been telling my colleagues about what happened this summer in Indianapolis. And quite frankly, I think they're learning, and I think they're going to learn even more. But, I'm happy for what those young people did. Boy, you guys are just, I mean, the energy from some of those peaceful protests downtown, you made a difference. And, you know, that's the most important part. You made a difference. And if you don't think so, just sit tight. Sit tight.
And one last question I just thought of, and I probably give you like a lightning round of 1 minute, is now that you've made history, what would be your advice to the next person that comes after you, whether they be a man or a woman, but the next person of color to be any floor leader in any house at in the state house?
Here's the thing that I think my responsibility is actually to blaze a trail. Listen, I don't expect to be the last person of color to lead a caucus in the state of Indiana, but I am the first. So when you are the first, I think there's an inherent responsibility to do the best you can. You're going to make mistakes, and I've made them, and will continue to make some mistakes. But the reality is that if I don't do the best that I can, it's going to set that next generation back 20 years from where I am. And so my job simply is to lay the foundation so that they can come and do a better job than me. It's continuing to build. So I'm going to build the foundation. I'm going to leave the frame and the rest of the house for the next generation, and y'all build on that foundation.
And I can certainly tell your work is definitely going to pay off, and people looking back are going to be grateful. And so, with that, I want to say congratulations, Mr. Leader, and thank you again for everything you have done for not only the Black community, but in every aspect of your work that affects all of Indiana. Thank you for blazing a trail in your own right. Thank you for getting interns in trouble with Ms. Rogers. Uh, uh, and also, thank you to our interpreter, Marla, for this evening. We are so appreciative of you for taking time out and joining us as well. And thank you to our audience and to those who come across this video weeks, months, years from now, and take lessons from Senator Taylor and the advice he has given us to make our own history. And with that, I wish everyone a happy Black History Month. And thank you. And thank you to the state party for this.
Thanks, James.